Welcome to the Happy Mindset, episode 107. Today's episode is called Learned Helplessness. Today I'm just going to talk around learned helplessness, and I'm going to talk around the locus of control as well. These are two concepts. They're two concepts that I came across in psychology that helped me to understand this mindset better. So the way I'm going to talk about this is mainly to raise an awareness of this being a mindset rather than it being an objective thing that's happening to you. I'll talk about it in relation to just my own experience, like how I've seen this play out in my own life. So like when I wasn't aware of learned helplessness, I didn't associate it with my mindset. I associated it more of like life happening to me. I had no real say in the outcomes, and that ties into the locus of control. So the locus of control, there's two main locus of controls you can have. You can either have an internal focused locus of control, which is that you've got this belief that you do have an effect on the outcomes in your life and you do have an effect on the things that happen. The external locus control is more focused on the external, which is more feelings of like, I couldn't do anything about it, and there's more of a giving up of your power to things. That's where that locus of control goes. So when I wasn't aware of these concepts, or I wasn't aware of this experiment as well, this is an experiment that was carried out on dogs in the 1960s by Martin Seligman and a few of his colleagues. Basically, the experiment, what they did was they got a group of dogs together. Ethically, I don't know whether they'd be able to do this now. I'd say it was even challenging for them at the time to do this. But what they did was that they shocked these dogs. They put them into a box and they shocked them a few times until they were conditioned to believe that they couldn't get out of the box. So there was like they were trying to jump out of the box before, but they get a shock. They get a shock whenever they try to do that. So they did that for, I don't know how long they did that, but did it to such an extent that the dog was conditioned to believe they couldn't jump over the box without getting a shock. Once they'd reached that stage, they didn't shock the box anymore, and they found in the dogs that they didn't even try anymore. Even though they weren't going to get shocked, they didn't try anymore because they were so conditioned to believe and associate trying to escape with that shock that they just gave up. They didn't try anymore. You can look into that experiment. I probably butchered it to some extent there, but it's an awareness of this, that this is something that plays out in our own lives as well as adults. As human beings as well, this is something that we can bring with us from childhood into adulthood, unconsciously not being aware of this is what's happening, and it can limit us in a lot of things that we can do. Another analogy that I quite liked as well was the analogy of a baby elephant in a circus. So in order to make these elephants more docile when they grow into enormous elephants, because the thing is the elephant could run away whenever they wanted to because they're a huge beast, but the elephant doesn't know that, and what they do for baby elephants is that they tie them to I don't know whether they still do this, but at one stage anyway they were doing this, where they'll tie their leg to like a pole, and the elephant will try to escape for a while, and they won't be able to escape because the pole is too strong for it. The elephant doesn't realize though, like when it grows into an adult, that it's now powerful enough to break free. But because it was so conditioned as a baby elephant that it couldn't break free, there was such a belief there, it doesn't try anymore. It's accepted its lot in life. So that's another analogy, another kind of story that helps me to understand this, how this plays out on a human level, because this is all psychological. It's not something that is very physical, so you mightn't necessarily be aware of this. So how I'll apply this to my own life, I'll just talk about how I've seen it play out in my own life a bit. So the way I see it play out in my own life is the varying different things I can do. There was one stage in my life where I wasn't a Luddite, but I was very bad at technology. I didn't take an interest in technology. And a lot of the thought process that was stopping me there was just this strong belief, this strong conditioned belief that I'd picked up on just unconsciously, that technology wasn't for me. I was a language person. That was a belief, a conditioned belief. It was only when I started taking action steps, like I was that baby elephant who suddenly realized that I'm no longer a baby elephant, I'm an adult elephant, and I can start tugging away at this pole a bit now because I'm stronger. That was kind of the realization that I had there, and that allowed me to explore more into technology, that I'm an adult now. I can explore these things without fear of repercussion around that psychologically for me. Because when I was a child, that pulling on the pole that would manifest in more of a psychology of like, I try something, I wouldn't be immediately good at it, or I wouldn't be good at it after a while, and I'd have this kind of self-deprecation, or I'd have this kind of, my self-esteem was tied into the skill set. So now as an adult, if I try something and I realize, oh, it's not worth the effort, I don't want to do this, I don't have as much of that like self-esteem tied into it. It's kind of like that pull isn't there for me. There's definitely still other areas where I struggle with this, and I found that it's, as an adult, as you develop, your world expands, so you can find new groups of people, you can find different environments to be around. It's quite challenging then to actually embody the stuff that you've learned around the people that you grew up with that might see you in a different way. So that I found that challenging, that you're confronted with people who have known one version of you, and they might meet you again as an adult, and they might unconsciously or consciously be projecting what they know of you or who they think you are onto you, and vice versa. That can be challenging. That's a challenging part, and that's how they learn helplessness. It's not just like a mindset you snap out of. It's not something that like you read it and you're like, oh, I get it now, and you're free from this. I found that it's learned helplessness and locus of control, these psychological concepts and these experiments, they help to make things more evident to you. They help to like start pointing you in the direction of mindset and like your own internal state, how that's affecting your life. That's pretty much what it's doing. It's just pointing you in the right direction. Then over time you start to see this play out more and more, like as you're open to the idea that maybe my locus of control is a bit off, maybe I can do a lot more than I think I can do. And so even when programming now as well, even something as subtle as the mindset level of problem solving, I find whenever I am faced with a new problem or a new challenge in work, the stories and narratives that usually crop up for me are like, I can't do this. There'll be variations of I can't do this. It's not even imposter syndrome. It's just like, I know it's going to take a lot of effort to try and look at this in a way where I'll be able to figure out the problem, figure out the solution. I know there'll be a lot of mental energy and effort that I don't know for sure whether I'll be able to get the solution or not. It seems like a lot of hard work, and I'm not even guaranteed I'll get the outcome. So that's initially the resistance that comes up there on the mindset level. And it's very much of a feeling of like learned helplessness. I feel helpless in that situation because I'm faced with a problem that I haven't solved before. So my natural default is to go, this is too hard for me. I don't even want to try. Like I can't do this. That's the feeling sensations. And it's through exposure from doing that in the long term, just day by day doing that, you develop that capacity to notice that more and to ignore that a bit more. Well, even in the ignoring, that's something as well that's quite subtle and quite nuanced. Like, I guess with the learned helplessness as well, there's been a huge amount of stories in my life around doing things that are quite personal, doing things that I find meaning in, and putting it out there, and maybe people laughing at it and laughing behind my back and stuff like that. And up until this point in time, I have chosen to ignore that narrative, ignore it as much as possible, so I can just get on with my work. It's only been in recent weeks that I've realized that isn't that helpful. It's helpful to the extent that it can help me to just get on with things and create things. But if I don't acknowledge that feeling, it's not going to go anywhere. It'll still be there in the back of my mind. That fear will always be there. So it's been in recent times that I've realized, like, just let it in and feel it, and just see what this grounded in. Is there any substance to these feelings, this fear? And that's generally how I've approached facing fears. Like, it's a very subtle thing, because these fears, these irrational fears, are feelings. Like, they're feelings that are going on internally. There's a certain amount of, like, there's fear in the external world of, like, that'll keep you safe. Like, if you see, like, somebody coming at you with some trying to kill you or something, you run away. Like, that's stuff that's helpful. But it's the irrational, illogical fears that are based off of, like, how we think about things, like our fears in our thinking. They're not helpful. They're not helpful for you as a person, and they're not helpful for the people you're trying to help as well. So I found that it's kind of peeling the layers of the onion. It's like, as you move from one level to the next. There's like different things that you're more and more okay with facing. And so that's a narrative and an experience that I'm more willing to feel into now as well. So that's generally how I approach fears and irrational, illogical fears. So learned helplessness, how this helps me as well as a self-directed learner, is that it just opens up a lot more to me. Like, because I'm aware of this being more of a mindset than anything, when it comes to learning things and studying things and the paths I choose to follow, even career-wise, things then become more centered around what's of interest to me. I acknowledge that any skill set is difficult to develop, but I'm not interested in all skill sets, and I can't pursue all skill sets. So the questions become more around what skill sets am I interested in following, rather than before my mindset when I was living inside this learned helplessness, when I thought it was an external thing. I was cut off from technology. I didn't see that as a viable career path for me because it looked difficult. And like anything looks difficult to begin with. Languages look difficult to me to begin with. Like I can remember when I was even 12, 13 years old watching French movies on TG Car. I'd be looking at it and I'd be like, I can't understand a word they're saying. But I'm fascinated by it. Like I really want to understand this. I want to be able to communicate this. I thought it was a really cool thing to be able to speak a second language. And so by entertaining that, by following that path, I became the person who could speak French. So when I became aware of the learned helplessness I had around technology, started seeing it as more of a mindset, then that gave me that curiosity of like, it'd be cool to actually understand some of the code that I see. When I see lines of code on the screen, I'd love to be able to understand that. And so that got me into the frame of mind of like thinking of it in terms of a language. I just thought back to like when I was looking at French, I didn't understand any of the lines in the book as well. Like I couldn't understand anything. It was a foreign language to me. So that got over my initial helplessness around looking at lines of code and not knowing where to begin. And then I started looking at pattern recognition, like I did with languages. It's like when you start figuring out the logic, and when you start figuring out a few key things, then you can start reading, and it gives you a bit of confidence and confidence and momentum. Then you can build off of, because again, you're shifted from that locus of control being internal, and that learned helplessness. You're aware of it, and when it does come up, you're aware it's the learned helplessness that's there. It's not the actual reality of the situation, and you can just get on with things a bit more. Because with technical skills, a lot of it boils down to the consistency, to showing up every day. And with programming, even with French as well, it's just, I suppose it's been a while since I remember the growing pains from learning French. But there's a lot of days that like it's just very difficult. It's like, but it's that consistency that you build from just showing up and doing the work each day, even though you've got these kind of narratives that can play in your head sometimes and try and get you to doubt yourself. From showing up, doing the work every day, from feeling the frustration, feeling the overwhelm, that allows you to chunk it and just deal with it better. And then you just, over time, you start learning this stuff. So now, like, for example, I'm in a place now where I can speak in a podcast. Even when I started this 2 years ago, I had so much like anxiety within me that I wouldn't have been able to like record a podcast for 20 minutes maybe of me speaking. It wouldn't have been possible for me at the very start. It was just from gradual increments. Like a year in, I think I did the first podcast myself, and that was a short one. And then it's been 2 years on the line, I've been just doing them more consistently myself, because I've always had these ideas, and I guess I've been drifting more towards a mindset as well of like actually seeing these things play out and putting them into my own words and trying to explain them, articulate them. Because it's from me doing that, then I get a clearer sense of like what I do and what I don't know. That's very beneficial to me, because otherwise, again, you can fool yourself. You can think you know a lot more than you do. But if you can't verbalize it and you can't like relate it to your life in some way, like it's not that impactful. And I think that's what turns a lot of people off of books, reading, more of the theories and stuff like that, because you can tend to just associate it with theory and nice ideas, and nothing actually changes. which it doesn't until you start like looking at this in a way where, for example, this concept of learned helplessness, how does this actually apply to my life? How can it help me to do things that I wouldn't be able to do otherwise? And so like what I'm explaining today, there are two concepts. They're not the only two. As I move forward this podcast, I'll incorporate in more and more concepts and things that have just helped me over the years to reinforce this mindset in me. Because a lot of it too is like distilling the essence from these concepts. So it's the patterns and principles. It's like you see this concept, like those two concepts today, learned helplessness and locus of control. They're very, very connected from what I can see. Like the locus of control being external is a feeling of helplessness, and the locus of control internal is a feeling of powerfulness within. And the learned helplessness there is like a feeling of, like that's the focus of the external. And then like you can also learn to be helpful, I guess, to yourself, and helpful in the way that you're just tapping into the power within that sometimes gets clouded over with all these doubts and all these external focusing thought processes, like all that stuff that's kind of cluttering your potential. So that's the main things I wanted to touch on today. There are two concepts in psychology that have helped me over the years. As I move forward, I'm just going to keep bringing in just different things I've learned through philosophy and psychology. As well, what this does for me is it gives me more of a reason to pay attention when I read psychology or philosophy. What did I read recently? Oh, it was to do with parsing. Yeah, so I did a podcast. Around parsing. So I did a podcast. It was actually a podcast I was going to release today, but I wasn't fully happy with it. I want to do it again to get it a bit better. And parsing came up. And in the podcast episode, I mentioned parsing being like, the essence of it is like sifting through the information, getting at the important stuff. Which I think it can mean that when people say, like I often hear Elon Musk saying, you just need to parse through the information or something along those lines. And for me, that's what that felt like. But then during the week, as I was coding, I came across like parse in JavaScript. I think it was to parse or some function or something, you know. And I started looking at the parsing again. And I was like, shit, no, that's not really the meaning. What I said in that podcast wasn't really the meaning of parsing. And so that's gotten me interested in looking at parsing again, revisiting it, because it's in linguistics and it's in programming, parsing. And for just briefly looking at it again, parsing's like, I don't want to butcher this again, but parsing's like looking for making sure something's structurally correct. Like in languages, it would be the actual syntax of the sentence. It'd be like, is it structurally correct? I'm not gonna elaborate on this too much today. I think I'll do another podcast when I've got a better understanding of this, because it's in linguistics, it's in programming as well. And I don't know. I might do an episode if it's something that could be of benefit. I'll do an episode around that. But again, that's down to the mindset. Before, if I did that, I wouldn't even mention that in the podcast today. I was even hesitant first for a second of mentioning this. But I said I'll mention it because this is reality. Like, you're not going to get everything perfect. And so this is part of like this process for me, is that just like talking things out, talking things through, and then revisiting something if I feel like I haven't got the essence of that right. And there's nothing wrong with that either. There's nothing wrong with that. It's something. We can build on something. We can't build on nothing. So yeah, that's just what I wanted to share today. Learned helplessness, locus of control. I think you'll find that useful if you just read into that experiment too, learned helplessness, if it's something new to you, and just look at locus of control too. It can help you to look more in the direction of mindset, something that I try and keep in my mind as well. That's it. Thanks again for listening, and I will speak to you on the next episode.